This is the story of a staggering moral contradiction. In less than 24 hours, what was designed to be a triumphant, statesman-like return to the global philanthropic stage transformed into a masterclass in tone-deaf commercial desperation. What looked like a simple, harmless mirror selfie was actually a devastating metaphor for the collapse of a once untouchable brand. In this video, we are going to unpack the disastrous anatomy of Meghan Markle's recent appearance in Geneva. We will explore how a solemn World Health Organization event, dedicated to the victims of digital harm, was overshadowed by vanity, staggering hypocrisy, and the subtle, devastating signals that reveal a deeply isolated figure. We will look at why the press ignored the message and focused on the Armani, how the sudden controversies surrounding her closest allies expose a one-sided loyalty, and what this catastrophic misreading of the public room means for the future of the Sussex Empire. To understand the sheer velocity of this fall from grace, we must first look back at the golden era. There was a time not so long ago when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry held the cultural world in the palm of their hands. They were heralded as the ultimate modernizers, the progressive breath of fresh air that an ancient institution desperately needed. When they stepped back from royal duties, they didn't just leave a family, they launched a billion-dollar ideological empire. They were flanked by the most powerful titans of Hollywood and Silicon Valley. Their inner circle was a fortress of A-list billionaires, political heavyweights, and global media moguls. They commanded historic Netflix deals, Spotify empires, and the absolute unwavering protection of the cultural elite. They had the moral high ground, the victim narrative, and the unprecedented luxury of shaping their own truth on a global scale. But privilege is a fragile currency when it is not backed by authenticity. Today, that fortress is unrecognizable. The billionaires have quietly distanced themselves. The lucrative contracts have evaporated or stalled. The narrative of victimization, once a potent weapon, has suffered from fatal overexposure. And so the current reality requires a constant, exhausting hustle, a relentless pursuit of relevance disguised as philanthropy. This is the stark reality that preceded the trip to Switzerland. It is the agonizing contrast between the billion-dollar PR illusion of the past and the commercial desperation of the present. By mid-May of 2026, the pressure on the Sussex camp was palpable. The global stage had recently witnessed Catherine, the Princess of Wales, executing a flawless, universally praised trip to Italy. Catherine's engagements were characterized by effortless diplomacy, authentic connection, and a refusal to make the narrative about herself. For Meghan, who has always viewed public life through a highly competitive lens, the contrasting headlines were undoubtedly a bitter pill. The Sussex brand desperately needed a counter-narrative. They needed a moment of undeniable global gravitas to prove they were still players on the world stage, operating at the highest levels of humanitarian influence. Geneva was meant to be that moment. The stage was set in partnership with the World Health Organization. The cause was undeniably serious and utterly heartbreaking: the unveiling of the Lost Screen Memorial. This installation featured 50 illuminated screens, each displaying the mobile phone lock screen of a child who tragically lost their life due to cyberbullying, online grooming, and digital harm. It was an event that required absolute solemnity, profound empathy, and total self-effacement. It was a moment that demanded the speaker disappear into the cause, but this is where the profound ethical collapse occurred. Just hours before stepping in front of grieving families and global health ministers to deliver a somber lecture on the devastating perils of the digital world, Meghan made a choice that exposed the hollow core of her entire platform. She turned to Instagram. In a move that PR analysts are calling staggeringly tone-deaf, she posted a mirror selfie from inside her closet. The caption read, "Mama's little helper." In the photo, she deliberately exposed her young daughter Lilibet, a child whose privacy she has fiercely, aggressively litigated to protect, using her as a prop for a vanity post. But the exposure of the child was only half of the moral outrage. The photograph itself was a calculated, boastful display of exorbitant wealth. It was a carefully curated exhibition of a wardrobe valued at over $250,000. On the floor sat perfectly placed Dior and Manolo Blahnik heels, and clearly deliberately visible was the label of the black Giorgio Armani suit she would wear to the memorial later that day. This was not a mistake, it was a commercial strategy. A woman who was about to stand alongside the world's most senior public health official to discuss the measurable, preventable, and often fatal harms of exposing children to social media, had just fed her own child into the relentless algorithm to manufacture a curiosity gap and generate clicks. She weaponized her daughter's image to serve as a shop window for luxury fashion. The hypocrisy was not just palpable, it was breathtaking. It revealed a deeply ingrained instinct to prioritize personal branding over the very cause she was hired to champion. The Geneva speech was the rhetoric, but the closet photograph was the cold, undeniable reality. When Meghan finally arrived at the Place des Nations, the visual humiliation continued, though, in a more subtle, atmospheric way. Dressed in the heavily promoted black Armani suit, she stood in an area that looked less like a secure, high-level diplomatic zone and more like a cordoned-off traffic island. Observers immediately noted the glaring lack of the intense, state-level security she has so frequently demanded and sued to obtain. In the background of the footage, ordinary people were seen casually putting on their coats, looking at their phones, entirely unbothered by the presence of a woman who claims to need unprecedented protection to simply exist in public. It was an open, vulnerable setting that completely undermined the meticulously crafted narrative of a family under constant, terrifying siege. Then came the speech. For 10 minutes, she addressed the crowd, heavily relying on perfectly calibrated rhetoric about how children are being shaped by relentless algorithms and exploitative engagement. But the delivery lacked the spontaneous human warmth required for such a devastating topic. The phrasing felt unusually polished, so rigidly structured and emotionally sterile that it immediately sparked a wave of online scrutiny. Within hours, rumors began circulating that the speech sounded as though it had been generated by ChatGPT. Critics ran segments of the transcript through AI detection software, pointing out the deeply ironic possibility that a speech condemning the destructive nature of unchecked technology may have been authored by an artificial intelligence model. Whether true or simply a harsh public perception, the fact that the audience's immediate takeaway was AI-generated speaks volumes about the complete lack of authentic connection she managed to forge. Furthermore, the anticipated media triumph never materialized. She expected to dominate the front pages of the global press, particularly in the United Kingdom. Instead, she was met with a deafening wall of indifference. Almost every major publication bypassed the story entirely, deeming it irrelevant. The only outlet that did give her front-page real estate was the Daily Mail, the very publication she and her husband had been locked in endless, bitter litigation with. And they didn't focus on her humanitarian words, they focused on the Armani, the hypocrisy and the staggering contradiction of her actions. But the isolation of Meghan Markle in Geneva is only one piece of a much darker psychological puzzle currently unfolding behind the scenes. To understand the true depth of the Sussex's current predicament, we must look at the silence surrounding their most loyal allies. For years, the photographer Misan Harriman has been one of the most crucial architects of the Sussex visual mythology. He is the man who took their carefully curated pregnancy announcements and the highly stylized portraits that defined their post-royal image. He was their fierce defender, the ultimate insider, and the chair of the prestigious South Bank Centre in London. But as Meghan stood on that traffic island in Switzerland, Harriman was fighting for his professional life back in the UK. In the exact same week, Harriman became the center of a massive, unprecedented media storm, following a series of highly controversial social media posts involving a horrific stabbing attack in Golders Green and a video allegedly comparing Reform UK voters to the Holocaust via a Susan Sontag quote. Harriman found himself the target of what his defenders call a vicious right-wing smear campaign and what his critics call a deeply offensive lapse in judgment. Over 80,000 complaints were filed against UK newspapers. Members of Parliament demanded his removal from his charitable chair. He became politically toxic overnight. This is where the story shifts from a PR disaster into a tale of ultimate betrayal for a couple who constantly demand absolute unwavering public loyalty from their friends, who cut off family members for perceived slights and freeze out anyone who doesn't vigorously defend them in the press. Their reaction to Harriman's professional execution has been chilling. Prince Harry, who recently popped over to the UK and previously made a point of supporting Harriman's exhibitions, has said absolutely nothing. Meghan Markle, who weaponizes her voice for every conceivable cause, has remained completely silent, while the man who helped build her image is publicly torn apart. They have offered no statement of support, no public defense, not even a subtle social media signal to throw him a lifeline. This silence is the most devastating detail of all. It proves that in the Sussex ecosystem, loyalty is strictly a one-way street. Friends are only useful as long as they provide positive illumination. The moment they become a liability, they are discarded into the dark. As Meghan packed up her Armani suit and prepared to leave Geneva, she wasn't just leaving behind a failed PR stunt, she was returning to a shrinking, isolated fortress in California, leaving a trail of discarded allies and exposed hypocrisies in her wake. And behind the closed doors of Montecito, the realization is finally setting in. The cameras are still flashing, but the audience has already walked away. The quiet that followed the Geneva trip was not just the standard aftermath of a poorly received public engagement. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a profound strategic isolation. When the cameras stopped flashing and the black Armani suit was packed away, the reality of what had transpired on that Swiss traffic island began to settle over the Montecito estate. For years, the Sussex narrative engine relied on a highly combustible fuel, the idea that they were global figures of immense consequence, pursued by a rapacious press and protected by a fortress of elite allies. But in Geneva, the machinery failed. The press chose indifference, the public looked away. And the fortress of Hollywood validation showed its first major structural fractures. Behind the scenes, the cracks are widening into chasms. Reports emerging from within their operational circle paint a picture of an increasingly frantic and stressful working environment. Those tasked with managing the Sussex brand are facing an impossible mandate to manufacture the gravity of a royal tour without the institutional weight, diplomatic infrastructure, or authentic public goodwill that makes such events successful. The revelation that Meghan was still rewriting and tweaking her speech as she arrived at the venue speaks volumes about the internal chaos. It reveals a profound lack of organizational discipline, a symptom of a team operating in a constant state of reactive panic. When nothing truly works out in the right direction, the blame inevitably shifts downward, leading to a high turnover of staff and a growing sense of professional exhaustion among those left to salvage the wreckage. This operational instability is mirror-imaged in the deep psychological strain now testing the core of their partnership. A marriage built on the shared identity of global exile is uniquely vulnerable. When the exile loses its glamour and becomes a relentless commercial hustle for Prince Harry, the contrast between his past life of effortless institutional status and his current reality must be agonizing. He is a man who once commanded the highest levels of state security and military respect, now reduced to watching his wife use their daughter as a digital prop to promote luxury fashion brands on social media. Sources suggest a growing divergence in their personal and professional aspirations. Harry appears increasingly drawn to a quieter, more traditional philanthropic path reminiscent of his homeland, while Meghan remains locked in a hyper-competitive pursuit of commercial relevance and Hollywood validation. When every public appearance becomes a high-stakes gamble for survival, the domestic sphere becomes the ultimate shock absorber for public rejection, creating a pressure cooker where private resentment can easily take root. The erosion of their inner circle is perhaps the most telling indicator of this declining currency. It is a cold truth of the entertainment elite that loyalty is a commodity traded for mutual prestige. When the Sussexes first landed in America, they were the ultimate status symbol for billionaires looking to purchase a slice of progressive moral authority. Tyler Perry famously provided the sanctuary of his mansion and the security of his private plane, a gesture they gushed over as the ultimate proof of their global importance. But today, that public support has vanished into thin air. Tyler Perry has quietly receded from their public narrative, offering no visible defense or validation as their brand faces a historic freefall. In the unforgiving lexicon of high-stakes PR, this quiet distancing is known as a soft exit. It is the moment when powerful patrons realize that a relationship has become a liability, and that the ticket of admission to the Sussex Circle is no longer worth the reputational cost. This calculated withdrawal stands in devastating contrast to the effortless permanence of the British royal family. The fury that reportedly consumed the Sussex camp over the glowing press received by Catherine, the Princess of Wales, during her recent trip to Italy, is a classic study in psychological projection. Meghan's anger stems from a deep, unacknowledged understanding that Catherine possesses the one thing, that money. Armani suits and aggressive PR cannot buy institutional legitimacy. Catherine's global appeal does not require a frantic 10-minute speech without graphics or a carefully timed social media stunt. Her authority is derived from a quiet adherence to duty, a refusal to center the narrative on herself, and an authentic connection to the people she serves. The public can instantly detect the difference between an enduring symbol of national continuity and a performative, humanitarian enterprise that requires a constant influx of personal attention to justify its existence. Ultimately, why does this story resonate so deeply with millions of viewers around the world? It is because the saga of Harry and Meghan has transcended the boundaries of conventional celebrity gossip and evolved into a profound modern morality play. It is a story about the ultimate cost of trading institutional protection for the illusion of total personal autonomy. They left a thousand-year-old monarchy in search of freedom, only to find themselves captive to a far more ruthless master, the global attention economy. In the palace, their relevance was guaranteed by birth history and tradition. In the marketplace of California, their relevance is entirely transactional, dependent on their ability to continuously monetize their personal lives, their grievances, and their children. The deep tragedy of their current situation is that they have sacrificed irreplaceable familial bonds and a lifetime of guaranteed service for a commercial currency that is rapidly depreciating. As the dust settles on the Geneva disaster, the point of no return seems to have been crossed. The strategy of weaponized victimhood and performative philanthropy has reached its natural, exhausted limit. The public room has shifted, and the audience is no longer buying the illusion. What remains is a lonely fortress in Montecito, a trail of discarded allies and a brand running entirely on empty rhetoric. The cameras will surely continue to follow them, but the nature of the public gaze has changed forever. It is no longer a look of fascination or sympathy, but a cold, forensic observation of a historic fall from grace. If you found this narrative analysis insightful, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. We will see you in the next story.